Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, Happy New Year. Hope that your new year is getting off to a great start. If you were able to enjoy the Stranger Things finale, I hope that it lived up to your expectation. If you're a fan of someone that has either exited or is still in the college football playoff, hope that you weren't too disappointed. I mean, at least some of us don't support teams that lost. Anywho, on to bigger and better things when it comes to the Braves. And as always, here to break them down with me, one of the best when it comes to breaking down the Braves, my podcast partner, if he's still talking to me after that little quip, Stephen. Hey, buddy. Hey.
What's up, man? Yeah, I missed Tennessee's playoff game. How much? I don't remember.
I didn't. I was glad they didn't. Yeah, but anyway, we'll go ahead with Braves.
Yeah, so Happy New Year, obviously, to everybody listening. It's belated at this point. It's January 5th or 6th. I don't know what day it is. January 6th today. So,
David, I don't care if it's not Larry David approved. You could say Happy New Year.
Yeah, I think 1 week is fair. I think anytime in the first week of January. I agree with Larry David, though. After that, it is weird. You can't be at like Martin Luther King Day wishing people Happy New Year.
I'm going to be still saying the Valentine's Day. It's fine.
Yeah, well, that's you're you. You're special. So, yeah, Happy New Year to everybody. 2026 is here. 2025 is gone. Thank God. If you're a Braves fan, that was a miserable year that we just went through. We do appreciate everybody that followed along all year, of course. But with a new year becomes new hope. And for every team in baseball, we're rapidly approaching spring training. I think pitchers and catchers report in like 5 weeks, if I counted right. So it's coming. It's coming quick. And I don't think the Braves are done yet. And we've got a little bit of stuff to talk about. There's been some buzz about a specific guy that we're going to probably focus on today. But yeah, spring training's coming, and it can't come quick enough.
Absolutely. And, with the fact that there's, hey, we've been through the winter meetings, we've been through the holidays, there's a lot of activity that's happened so far this offseason, especially with the Braves. But the thing is that some of the major players in free agency still are out there. I think if you were to take a poll of all the outlets that rank the top 10 free agents, I think still, 6 to 7 to 8 of the top 10 free agents are still left unsigned. We've talked quite a bit about the Braves, focusing on adding a starting pitcher and a difference-making starting pitcher. We've talked at length about the free agent options: Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, Zach Gallen, Chris Bassett, among others. Last week, we talked about Tatsuya Ime because the Braves were going a bit of an unusual route to potentially consider him. He wound up going to the Houston Astros. Well, now we have another pitcher that comes to mind, and it again is at a different avenue than going after one of the top tier free agent starters, and that is Brewers starting pitcher Freddy Peralta, who many teams have inquired about in recent weeks to potentially trade for. Stephen, when I mention the name Freddy Peralta, I don't think that this is a pitcher that may get his just due. I don't think that he is a top 10, 15 pitcher in the game necessarily, but if you look over the past 3 years, a lot like Framber Valdez, just durable, consistently showing that he can be a front of the line starting pitcher, maybe not necessarily a ace, more of a 2, but the durability, the consistency, and he's gotten better over the past 3 years as well. He's very attractive for teams that are looking to make a difference maker into the starting rotation, and there are a few, if any, teams that are looking for that more than the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, so his name's been out there for most of the offseason. So the Brewers are the type of organization. The Brewers are a lot like the Rays, a lot like the Athletics. They don't get the same kind of pub, but they operate very similar in that when guys get to arbitration, it's kind of a clock that starts. And that, we saw the same thing with Corbin Burns. They get to a certain point, the Brewers are looking to move. They're looking to move, even if the Brewers are trying to win, and they clearly are. The Brewers were one of the best teams in baseball last year. The way they operate financially, they can't allow guys this good to leave for nothing in free agency. So they try to get something for them, which is why Milwaukee is interested in moving them, because on the surface, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a team that's trying to compete to trade a guy like this. I said on Twitter a couple of days ago that I do want to make it clear that I don't think he's an ace. And people took that the wrong way. That's not an insult. Like, calling somebody more of like a 2 or 3 starter is not an insult. being a number 2 or 3 starter in Major League Baseball is incredibly hard. And not a lot of guys would you put in that category. Like I would put Dylan Cease or Framber Valdez in that category. And you see what those guys get on the free agent market. So like, that's not an insult, but people are going to look at the 270 ERA that he put up last year and think, well, this guy's the ace of his staff. And I don't think the peripherals support that. I think he's more of a 2 or 3. He's got 1 year of team control left. So those things matter in terms of the price. But every single team in baseball would benefit from adding Freddy Peralta to their rotation. Every single team. There's not a single team in baseball that would not be better for having this guy. That leads to a couple of problems. One, every team in baseball is probably making calls to Milwaukee right now, asking, how much it's going to cost. And two, because his salary is so cheap, even like the dirt cheap teams, like the teams that are never in on free agents, can be in on a guy like Peralta. Because as long as you got a decent farm system, as long as you got the pieces Milwaukee wants, you can do anything. You're in the race versus free agents. Not every team is in the race. So it is a complicated deal. I don't know how much the Braves, the Braves definitely checked in, but when he gets to like farm system versus farm system, I don't know how they compete. I don't know what Milwaukee thinks, but it makes a lot of sense. And I don't want people to take that I called him because I said he wasn't an ace. I don't want people to freak out. He's a really good pitcher. I think he's probably a 2, maybe like a high end 3, probably closer to a 2. And he could help every team in baseball.
I think a way to maybe put it that, maybe, more accepted by some is I agree with you. He doesn't have the track record of an ace, correct?
Right.
He has the track record of more of a 2 or 3. To
Right.
be fair, though, he did the actual counting stats last year were definitely ace level. 2.70 ERA, 5th in the Cy Young race. You go to Baseball Savant, there's a lot of red there, a lot of red that you like to see. And the thing is that at 29, he has progressively gotten better as well. But last year was a bit of an outlier, still worth just 3.6 FWAR. He's in that 3-4 FWAR per year type range, and that again is more of a 2 or a 3. So I don't think it's insulting to call him a 2 or 3 at all. But unlike some other 2s and 3s, he's also got on his resume clearly an ace level type year, which again makes him more attractive for the right reasons for Braves, but also every other team in baseball. And the Brewers, we're going to get into this in just a moment. The Brewers have been here before, right? Like you said, this is how they operate. Just 2 years ago, they had Corbin Burns, who won, I believe, the 2023 Cy Young Award. I believe he was a year removed from when, I can't remember the exact off seasons, whatever. But he was a proven ace. He had been a Cy Young winner. And they traded him with 1 year remaining of control to the Baltimore Orioles. The Brewers have done this before. They know how to get value out of these type of guys because they're a very smart organization, and this is how they operate. So the fact is that while Freddy Peralta is very attractive because of his durability, because of the fact that he, has shown he can continue to elevate his overall production, the fact that he's coming off a career year and you're dealing with a smart organization, those 2 factors come into play, which makes it hard for the Braves, who may not necessarily have as much prospect depth to make an attractive offer comfortably as other teams do.
Yeah. And that's where it gets tricky, right? So again, Peralta signed this big extension, not big. It was a very small, it was a team-friendly extension. I think it was like 2021 or something like that. He's in the last year of this extension. It's one of these like Ozzy Albies extensions where he's making like $8 million next year, which is just
5 years, $15 million was basically the value of it.
Yeah, with a couple of club options at the end, and this is the last club. It was basically the Ozzy contract.
Yeah, 5 years, 30 total, I think. Yeah, or 7 years, 30.
So that's the level of money he's making, which is not. I mean, for a guy as good as him, is nothing. And that's what I mean. Every single team in baseball, there's not a. One thing that's happening right now with the CBA, potentially the lockout happening next year, you're seeing a lot of teams, even the really cheap teams, spend money trying to compete. Everybody's trying to get out ahead of this CBA negotiation. I think I think MLB sent a letter out to all the owners, especially some of the cheaper ones, that said, hey, we got this negotiation coming up. It would help us a lot if everybody spent some money this offseason. And so you're seeing the A's, you're seeing the Pirates, you're seeing the White Sox, you're seeing teams that don't normally do a lot actually make some moves this offseason. And the reason I bring that up is because damn near every team in baseball is trying to win right now. And we've heard this from other people where when teams are talking to other teams about trades, those teams aren't looking for prospects. They're looking for like major league ready players because almost every team in baseball is trying to win right now. That's important because every team in baseball trying to win could use Freddy Peralta at $8 million. $8 million is nothing. Every budget in the sport could support that for a guy this good. So I would literally guess the Brewers have fielded calls from 29 teams about Peralta. And so you have to have the best offer out of all of those teams. And to do that with the Braves' current farm system just seems like a very low probability to me. Now, he's only got 1 year of team control left, so that's going to suppress his value. I do think he's more of a 2 to 3 than an ace, but it only takes one team to disagree with me and offer the Brewers what they think ace level, a 1 year, 1 year of an ace level pitcher is worth, and it blows everybody else's offer out of the water. So it's just a really difficult guy to win it's really difficult to win a bidding war for Peralta when he's so cheap that literally all 29 other teams can be involved in him. I think the Braves do have some interesting pieces. I think the Braves have some interesting major league ready pieces like a Hurston Waldrop that the Brewers will be interested in. But again, are you willing to give up Hurston Waldrop for 1 year of Peralta? Right? I think we're going to talk about potential extension at some point in the show, but that would almost have to be like part of the deal. It was like, are you going to get an extension out of this guy? Because at 1 year, what are you willing to give up prospect wise? And that's a question every team has to answer. So it is a fascinating situation.
Well, let's explore that question. Let's explore that question with some details. If you could hear in the background, my 2-year-old himself was getting excited about the thought of Freddy Peralta, then was getting scared a bit as well at what it might cost. More on that in just a moment after a word from our partners. So, Stephen, let's dive into it. A fellow, foul territory member, Ken Rosenthal, who obviously is one of the best in baseball history when it comes to covering the sport. He talked about Freddy Peralta at length on today's episode of both Foul Territory as well as his own show, Fair Territory. And from the Foul Territory show, he brought up a very interesting comparison. Again, as I had mentioned, the Brewers had been in this spot before. Just 2 years ago, they traded, their ace at the time, Corbin Burnes, to the Baltimore Orioles for a package that included DL Hall, who I believe was someone who had certainly been a top prospect in the Orioles organization. I think he may have been on a few top 100 lists, but he also, I believe, was beyond prospect status at the time he was traded. They traded him. They traded at the time number 6 prospect Joey Ortiz, who wound up being a pretty good get for their major league squad, and the number 34 pick in the 24 draft, a competitive balance pick. What does that look like for the Braves? What would that, basically equate to nowadays if the Braves were to send a similar offer for Freddy Peralta? Well, I think the DL Hall comparison, that the Braves equivalent of that would be Hurston Waldrop. Now, if you were looking for the Brewers wanting to get another, infielder that they potentially could see in the majors in a year or two, Alex Lodice, who we just picked in the MLB draft, would be in that draft or be in the trade as well. And then for us, it wouldn't be a competitive balance pick. Like we wouldn't trade the number 26 pick. I don't think we can trade it. But it would be a lower level guy who would be the equivalent of maybe a late first, second round pick. That would kind of be, even if you don't think Peralta deserves to get as much for the Brewers as Burnes did, that would be the type of offer that I think would put the Braves near the top of what other teams can offer. And so when you start to look at it from that lens, when you start to look at what it potentially would cost, that gives you a better perspective of, is it truly worth it?
And remember, when the Orioles made that deal for Burnes, the Orioles are who the Brewers traded Burnes to. The Orioles had the number 1 farm system in baseball back then. That's when they had all of these young kids coming up.
Great point.
Yeah. And so the Braves do not. So even like some of their down lower prospects would still have been much higher ranked in the Braves system. So there are 100% going to be teams that can offer better packages than the Braves. The wild card is every single team views prospects differently. And Milwaukee just might like one of the Braves prospects better than they like some of the other, that's kind of the equalizer that we don't really know is everybody views prospects differently. So I do think it's going to cost a lot. I don't think it's going to cost as much as Burns. I think Burns was more of an established ace. I mean, again, he was coming off a Cy Young, maybe not coming off. I think it was 1 year removed from a Cy Young, but it was like a 7-WAR season that he put up. Like he was a bona fide number one. Peralta, again, I think, is more of a 3 to 4 win guy, probably more of a 3-win guy. So I think he's more of a 3 starter or high end or low end 2 starter. So I don't think he's going to bring that much, but I think Corbin Burns was making like $25 million that season.
He was making double. I believe he was making 17 to 18. I believe
18. Okay.
Double.
So the fact that Peralta is only making $8 million makes him more valuable in trade because every budget in the game can fit him in there. So I don't know. Maybe he does bring back something similar to Burns. I think I would still go on the under on that, but we'll see. And again, because all 29 teams can be involved in this, it literally only takes one team to be like, no, this guy can be an ace of our staff. And he's only 29. And again, it's 1 year, but you could probably tell yourself that you could work out an extension with him at some point. A lot of guys who get this close to free agency, which is, Peralta's 1 year removed from free agency. 2026 is his last year of team control. A lot of guys like that don't sign extensions because they want to see what the open market's like. But pitchers are different because the injury risk is higher. The aging curve is much more aggressive. And so a lot of times they're open to extensions when other guys, maybe position players, wouldn't be. So if you're the team trading for him, you could tell yourself, I bet we could get an extension worked out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you kind of have to have, if you're going to give up Hurston Waldrop and Alex Lodis, like for 1 year of this guy, you kind of have to at least give yourself a window to work out an extension because it's a lot. That's a lot to give up for 1 year of a guy. Now, the Braves would be substantially better next year, but unless you have some sort of hopes of an extension, that 1 year becomes awfully costly.
Absolutely. And you kind of bring it to the point of comparing it to, signing one of the top free agent starters. If you go out and you get a Valdez, you get a Suarez, you get a Zach Gallen. We'll discuss Suarez and Framber Valdez. More than likely, the total amount of contracts for those two guys, I imagine, will probably wind up in the low 9 figures, probably somewhere in a $110 to $130 million range. Yeah. I think Freddy Peralta may wind up there, maybe a little bit higher if he were to be an extension. So if you go out and you sign a Framber Valdez, you sign a Ranger Suarez, they're 2 to 3 years older than Valdez, so you may be paying for a little bit further into their careers. You also have to give up the draft pick. Whereas if you go after Peralta, you're giving up obviously a bit more in a trade, but you're also getting a younger pitcher who may be at maybe more in his peak than where Suarez and Valdez goes. So you can see it either way. One thing to take away from that is that the Braves have options that are out there. They're not desperate enough to where they have to absolutely go out and overpay for Peralta with the hope of an extension. They're not in that position. But if they were to go that route, you have the ability, number one, to keep your pick, obviously, in this draft, which is considered to be a pretty strong draft. So you'll be able to replenish whatever you get up in trade. And then say, for instance, you weren't able to sign Peralta to an extension. I say this in quotations. You potentially could offer him a qualifying offer a year from now, and you would get 2 high picks in the 27 draft. Now, you run a bit of risk because CBA negotiations may make it to where that's not the case. But the point that I'm getting at is that this gives the Braves options, right? They at least have options to explore, and they should look at all those options. But Stephen, something else that you brought to, recently in the chat that we have with Hammer Territory that I thought was a great point. You get Peralta for $8 million this year. But beyond this year, if you sign him to an extension, you're probably going to get him at $25 to $30 million.
Yeah.
Probably for a 3 to 4 win type player. If you give up a Hurston Waldrop, I'm not suggesting that Hurston has a very good chance of being at a Peralta level. But say Hurston Waldrop turns into a 2 to 3, win per year pitcher, F4 per year pitcher. His cost is pretty darn valuable compared to what Freddy Peralta would cost. So I'm not meaning to be too far-fetched with my optimism on Hurston Waldrop. My point in mentioning all this is how much goes into just kind of, considering options. The Braves have options, but that's, I think, the detail they're going into when it comes to considering what route to really go after to improve the rotation.
Yeah. And listen, the argument that if you trade for him, you get to keep your pick in the draft and then you can replenish whatever you traded in the draft coming up is a fair argument. Like, that's true. You have added to your pitching staff and not given up the pick, and whatever you give up, you can now replenish in the 2026 draft. The two wild cards are, one, how much is it going to cost? What is the trade package? There's not a single prospect in the Braves system that is untradeable to me, including Hurston Waldrop. I'm not as high on Hurston as other people are. Like, I would trade Hurston in a heartbeat on the right deal, but is 1 year of Peralta the right deal? And then the second wild card is it only going to be 1 year, or can you get an extension worked out? And how much is that extension going to be? All of that has to be factored into the equation of, should we do this or should we not? So it makes a lot of sense. The Braves need pitching. I would love to. Peralta is a level of. I would put Peralta at the same level as like Ranger, Suarez, and Framber. I think that's perfectly fair. Even if you want to say he's better than both of them. Even if you want to say he's better than Cease, I don't know that I would spend a lot of time arguing that. Maybe I would take Cease over Framber. I don't know. I would probably have to look into that more. But like, if Peralta was on the free agent market right now, he would get a contract comparable to those guys, like, easy, because he's 2 years younger than most of them. So he would probably get more money, actually. So that's the level of pitcher we're talking about. It just comes down to how much does Milwaukee want? Milwaukee is an extremely smart organization. Like, they are one of the best run organizations in baseball and have been for multiple years now. So they don't, they're going to aggressively price Peralta because they know they are in the catbird seat when it comes to the number of teams that are going to be interested, especially at $8 million. They cannot be overstated how big of a deal it is that he only makes $8 million next year. So Milwaukee's very smart. And how much is it going to cost? What is the trade package? And then is there a possibility for an extension? A lot of times teams will say, hey, I need a 48-hour window to work out an extension. And if I can get an extension done, then we'll say yes to the trade. And if I can't, then we won't. That's happened before. And I could see that happening with this, because 1 year is just tough. Now, they were able to trade Burns to the Orioles without an extension. So, it's not a guarantee. And Peralta has to be open to an extension. Like, that's a big part of that. I don't think Burns was open to an extension. I think he was ready to get to the open market. So it all matters here. It makes sense for the Braves, but this is a tough one to get to the finish line.
Yeah. And when we talk about the price for Peralta, I think Peralta is perfectly within his realm, especially if he comes off, another potential top 10 Cy Young season, which he's perfectly capable of doing.
Yeah.
He's got the mindset. He can put that together. That's 150 plus million that he's probably looking for in an extension. So,
I think so.
All that to be considered. But I think that this opens up conversation to another important part when it comes to how the Braves are going to continue to construct a roster into the future. I think that that's something that should also be discussed, and that is the fact that they just have not relied too much on trades over the past couple of years. More on that, especially from Steven's perspective, here in just a moment after another word from our partners. So, Steven, Alex Anthopoulos, one of the things that I was so excited about, nearly a decade ago when he came to the Braves, is that something that stood out during his time with Toronto is that he went after it. If there was an opportunity to go get a talent, regardless of where they were really in their career, regardless of price tag, so on and so forth, regardless of if he had them for the short term or long term, he went and made it happen. Before AJ Preller, there was Alex Anthopoulos. Anthopoulos wasn't to the level of Preller, but he was that kind of gunslinging GM who would make the risky deal that others wouldn't make. would not make. But since he's gotten to Atlanta, that hasn't necessarily been the case. Now, I will say this. When he does make a significant trade, he does typically very well. Look at the Matt Olson trade. Look at the Chris Sale trade. There have been some trades that have not worked out so well, like the Shawn Murphy trade. Though, again, I'm not bad-mouthing Murphy. It's just I think anybody would look 3 years into the trade and probably say it hasn't worked out as much as you might have liked. But the point is that he still does make trade. But we are now more than 2 years since he made the Vaughn Grissom for Chris Sale trade. And it was absolutely a home run. He's made other deals, obviously, in that time. He's acquired Pierce Johnson, acquired Joe Jimenez, acquired Jorge Soler at the summer of 2024. But there hasn't been, there's no part of this roster at the moment that is a significant contributor or that is going to be relied upon significantly in 2026 that has been acquired by trade over the past 2 years other than Chris Sale. I bring that up to say this. That's pretty eye-opening when you look at this roster. And I wonder if that's kind of a changing of the guard for Alex, or if as time goes on, he may start to decide he needs to make some trades. I want to get your perspective on that, then get into reasons why I think he may have to start going more the trade route in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, the Braves don't have the best farm system.
They do not.
I know. So I've heard Alex say a couple of times that we've never been told no. We've never been told that we don't have the prospects to get a deal done. We've had trades out there and they just haven't, the other team hasn't accepted. And I do think that is true. And I know for a fact that it's true. I know multiple teams last year, the Braves were interested in guys, and multiple teams last year wanted Drake Baldwin, and the Braves just said no.
Yeah. They were high level guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The thing the Braves don't have is while the Braves usually have a guy like that, what the Braves don't have is the next group of players after that.
Yeah.
That make deals like this possible, where you can still keep your best guy and still get deals done. And the example I've used in the past is like Boston trading for Garrett Crochet, but not having to give up either Roman Anthony or Marcelo Meyer.
Yeah.
Right? Or like their top 5, really. I mean, they kept most of their best prospects. That's what the Braves don't have. The Braves don't have the level of depth where they can go out and acquire impact talent and keep the best prospects for themselves. The Braves they don't have that level of depth. They have very little top-end depth.
Yes.
And they have very little top-end depth, especially in the high minors, which is, again, so many teams are trying to compete these days. They're not really looking for 16-year-olds. They're looking for 21-year-olds that are knocking on the door. So I do think that plays a role. If we're being honest, it's been a tough team to try to add to the last 18 months. So I think that plays a role. I mean, last year, if the Braves were better, I'm guessing they would have added something decent. The big shock last year was that they didn't sell off pieces, not that they didn't even acquire pieces. So I think it's a little bit of everything, but I don't think he has any. I don't think it's like he's against trading. I think it's just been a tougher environment specifically for the Braves the last couple of years. But again, I don't think that's going to be the impediment for our trade with Peralta. It's going to be how many other teams are involved in this.
Yeah, and I think a part that plays into it as well is that when you look at the strength of the Braves system, it is their pitching, right? They're starting to get a little bit more depth in that top level because of their pitching. But the problem is that they've also just had so many injuries that I don't blame Alex for being reluctant, for not wanting to give up that pitching depth. Again, to your point, I think that he would give it up in the right deal, but it'd be hard to do. But even when you start to tap into that pitching depth, like, AJ Smith-Shawver, who looked like he may be on the verge of a breakout year this year, he unfortunately undergoes Tommy John surgery. Yeah. Other thing is that the top flight prospects that they've had, Strider and Michael Harris II, years ago, Swellenbach and Baldwin the last 2 years, they've needed those guys. Those guys have filled big needs for this team, and they're a big part of the future. So that's why you don't trade them. So I certainly think that plays a part into it, as well as your excellent point about, the perspective of major league teams wanting more major league ready talent than, future talent. But the reason why I say that, while I don't think Alex has become less inclined to trade or, has less of a desire to trade, trades may become more of a focal point in the near future if things don't necessarily work out for this team. What I mean by that is that We just did, Brad and Scott did a great episode on, for instance, Ozzie Albies and Michael Harris, bouncing back, wanting to see Austin Riley bounce back, wanting to see Shawn Murphy bounce back. We've got a lot of ifs, a lot of hope that these guys bounce back. What if they don't? What if they don't bounce back to the level that they once were? That kind of lowers your ceiling a bit. The other factor of this team that needs to be considered, age is getting up there, especially on the pitching side of things. Raisel Iglesias, Chris Sale, Robert Suarez. You've got some older guy, Ronaldo Lopez. I know that he's not necessarily as old as those guys, but coming off an injury, you've got some guys, Matt Olson. Knock on wood, I'm not wanting for him to fall off. But if you look at some comparables like Mark Teixeira and others, it was their early 30s where they started to fall off a bit. The thing that I'm getting at is that both age, this team is gotten old quickly, and also the fact that you've seen multiple years now where guys have not progressed as you had hoped. If those things don't bounce back or maintain where you hope they do, trades are going to have to become your route of getting things done. You're going to have to take some risk. So that's why it's not necessarily needed right now, but a year from now, if we have another disappointing year, yeah, we'll have a lot of money out the books. But I think also you've really got to start considering the trade route, and where you might be reluctant to trade guys in the past, maybe you come a little bit more lenient on wanting to trade them now to really fill some needs where you need it.
Yeah. No, certainly. I mean, when you lock up this many pieces and then you have multiple, if we play a hypothetical game where the Braves have a bad season in 2026, that'll have been multiple bad seasons in a row. When you have this many guys locked up and you have multiple bad seasons in a row, then you got to start making changes. You got to start making moves. And again, when you have this many players locked up, usually that's via trade. So 100% it's going to have to become a thing if the Braves don't find their way back to the playoffs in 2026. But I do want to make one last point, and I know we're about to get out of here. The Braves do need to find some sort of long-term answer in the rotation because Chris Sale is under his last year of team control. Ronaldo Lopez only has 2 more years of team control. And again, he's dealing with all the injury stuff, and he might be a reliever. I'm still waiting to see. Spencer Strider, who knows? Who knows what Spencer Strider? Who knows in terms of health, and who knows in terms of production with Spencer Strider? Like the one guy the Braves have that has some control and talent combined that you're decently sure of is Swellenbach. And even he's coming off a major elbow issue that he had last year. So the rotation does not have a lot of long-term answers. So I have thought for a while, whether it's Framber, whether it's trading for Peralta and locking him up to an extension, it would help a lot for the Braves to have at least one legitimate long-term answer in the rotation. Now, with pitching, do you ever have any long-term answers? It's a fair question. Maybe not. And there's some people who don't think so. Like you never know what your rotation is going to look like 2 years from now. And that's fair. And maybe it's best to keep everybody on 2 and 3 year deals and figure it out year to year. But the rotation does have a lot of long-term questions. And they do have some young players. Hurston Waldrop could come up. He could have another good year. And all of a sudden, Hurston Waldrop looks like a long-term rotation piece. AJ Smith-Shawver, same thing, or pick one of your favorite young prospects that could come up and do that. But, that's why on top of, I think the Braves need another pitcher because of depth. They do have they don't have a lot of long-term answers there. And, Peralta could be that if you could get an extension done, but you got to trade for him first and you got to win that bidding war, and he's got to be open to an extension, which is not a given. And I would not be surprised at all if he came out in his agent or he said, no, we have no interest in an extension. We're going to take this thing to free agency. So it's a complicated deal to get done.
Now, the bright side of this for the Braves is that, again, I think that they have more pitching depth, more intriguing to quality prospect depth on the pitching side than they've had in many years. Waldrop, J.R. Ritchie, Owen Murphy, Didier Fuentes, John Carlos Lara. Yeah, there's several others out there, Owen Murphy as well. That's great. But I don't think that you need to tell anybody close to the Braves who's been here for a while it's great to have all that prospect depth. It definitely doesn't mean that it's going to lead to a long-term healthy rotation. You just got to go back a decade with all the prospect depth that the Braves had, and then you come to realize that really the only guy out of that group that had more than one productive season for the Braves was Max Fried.
Yeah.
So pitching depth, again, it's a war of attrition. So it's great to have it, but more often than not, it's great to have it to where it gives you a better chance of one or two productive arms coming out of it than a whole staff. So yes, I definitely do think that there needs to be things that are kept in mind. I definitely don't think that a big trade is absolutely needed, to make this team a true contender. I think they can be a true contender as they are. But when you play that if game, the Braves have lost that game more often than they've won it over the past 2 years. And that's why I'm saying all options being on the table, maybe more truth to that now than ever. So the options aren't there on the signing market. Brewers like what they see in the minor league system. Maybe Freddy Peralta makes sense. Maybe there's other options that could make sense as well. Alex has the ability, as we all know, to come out of left field. Perhaps there's a trade on the table that we don't know about yet for a player we're not really considering that can get the job done. The big thing, though, is that the Braves, again, have a lot of different routes they can go. And even as we're getting closer to spring training, not only does that mean something could happen quickly, it means that plenty of options can happen. Where one door closes, another could open to get something done. Steven, anything else from you as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
No, just reiterating what I said at the beginning. Spring training is coming quick. Now that we're on the other side of New Year's, it's coming. As we get closer, we'll start doing, more preview stuff into the 2026 season. We'll look at the roster. We typically wait until the roster is pretty much set to start doing that. At some point, we'll do a payroll show now that, again, most of the offseason heavy lifting has been done. We're still going to wait to see if there's one more, but we'll do a payroll show at some point just to go over payroll. But yeah, the content rolls on into 2026, and we appreciate, we so much appreciate the support that you guys have shown us.
Absolutely. That cannot be stated enough. Of course, you can find Stephen Tolbert at B_Outliers, myself at Stats SAC. Both of us, when it comes to coverage outside of the Braves, will certainly have plenty to talk about when it comes to basketball, both at the college and the professional level. Won't to dive too deep in that, but hey, watch those news outlets. Plenty of news to come along. But you, of course, can find Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, part of the PAL Territory family of podcasts. Until next time, for the wonderful Stephen Tolbert, my name is Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.